Welcome to Visual Latin. Why did you download this video? I'm going to give you some reasons. Of course, you did it because your parents told you to. You're learning Latin because they said so. You know what? You need something a little better than that. I mean, that's a great reason, because you can't really tell them no, because you're kids, obey your parents. But I'm going to give you some more reasons, so that you can tell yourself, okay, that's why I'm learning this language. There's more to it than that. Here's what. Here's why. Here's some reasons. Number one, when you learn Latin well, it will open the door to so many other languages. Everybody is impressed when you can speak another language. When you can speak two or three, they're blown away. Well, if you learn Latin well, you're going to be able to do that. If you choose to do it. You don't have to, I'm not telling you to. But if you choose to do it, you can. It makes the process easier. Learning Latin means that you're taking a language that's not been spoken for a while. Some people say it's dead. I say it's frozen. By that I mean there's not a lot of new words coming into the language constantly. You don't have to deal with words like fax machine and email and password and internet. All those words don't go into Latin because, you know what? The Romans didn't have that stuff. They didn't even have airplanes. You don't have to deal with words that deal with airplanes. All you have to do is focus on the core of the language, learn that part of the language well, and then take what you learn about Latin and apply it to all other languages. When I was a kid, I grew up in other countries. I grew up in Europe, and I learned to speak German while I was there. But you know what? I never spoke it very well. I sounded pretty good, and I had the accent and everything. But my German friends would tell me, we can understand what you're saying, but your grammar, it's terrible. The way you form sentences, it's terrible. I didn't understand what they meant until years later I learned Latin. And then I realized, oh, that's what they meant. Because you know what? Latin taught me a bunch about the way languages work. And then I went back and applied that knowledge to German. And even today, I think my German is better than it was then because I studied Latin. In fact, there's an old German proverb that says, if you don't know another language, you don't know your own. I think that if you learn Latin and learn it well, it makes you better at other languages. It makes you better at your own language. We're going to talk about that. Now, my personal favorite reason for studying Latin is that it opens the door to all the other Romance languages. Now, by Romance languages, I do not mean that you are going to be better looking or more romantic if you learn Latin. Maybe not. But anyway, I'm talking about languages that came from the Romans. And if you look at the word romance, and you drop off the ts at the end, you have the word Roman. They're Roman languages. The Roman languages, the Romance languages, are the languages that came from Latin. The Romans, as you know, conquered most of Europe, large sections of Asia, and all of North Africa. A lot of those territories conquered by the Romans were forced to speak Latin because the Romans were in charge. And when they were in charge, you did what they told you to do. Those people started speaking Latin, but then when the Romans went away, even though they were gone and their government was gone, their language stayed, and it turned into what we now call the Romance languages. In fact, according to Wikipedia, there are 25 of them at least. The big ones are Spanish, which I think is the biggest, Italian, French, Portuguese, Romanian, and look at the word Romanian. It has Roman in it. Walloon, whatever that is, and even one of the world's made-up languages, there's several, but one of the world's made-up languages, Esperanto, is slightly based on Latin. There's a lot of Latin terminology, a lot of Latin words in that language. So look, guys, if you learn Latin well, then you've got all those languages around Latin that are opened up to you. I learned Spanish in about a year, and I'm not perfect at Spanish, but I can speak Spanish quite well with my Spanish friends. And it didn't take me very long to learn the language because I already knew Latin. And Spanish is about 90% Latin. So is Italian. So is Portuguese, French, Romanian. So if you learn Latin well, you have opened the door to other languages. Not only that, English was formed. I shouldn't say that. It wasn't formed by Latin. It didn't come from Latin, but it was influenced by Latin. Maybe you guys know what I mean by that. In other words, the Romans put a lot of words into our language way back in our history. As a matter of fact, 90% of our big words in English, our multisyllable words, come from Latin. These are called derivatives. Derivative itself is a derivative. I'll explain that another time. A derivative is an English word that comes from a Latin word. Let me give you some examples. Trans in Latin means across. Well, that's where we get the word Trans Am, which is the name for a cool car back in the 1970s. And Trans Am is short for Transamerica, which means across America. It's also where we get transport. Porto means carry. Transport, to carry across. It's also where we get transform. Forma means shape. So transformers change their shapes and fight the Decepticons. It's also where we get translucent. Lucent means to shine. So the light shines through. What about miles? Here's another one. Miles in Latin means soldier. Now, the plural of it is milites. Milites means soldiers. That's where we get militia, military, militant. What about aqua? Aqua means water. That's where we get the word. I bet you can guess before I say it. Aquarium. But it's also where we get the word aquatic. It's also where we get the word, or is it aquatic? Some people say aquatic, some people say aquatic. It's also where we get the word aquifer, which means to carry water. Yeah, you don't use that one every day. Look, it opens up the door to English as well. I'm telling you, if you learn Latin, you have dipped into the language that has given us 90% of our big words. Let's say you want to become a writer. Okay? If you want to become a writer, what are you going to need? Words. And you're going to need to know how to use those words. And you're going to need to know what those words mean precisely. Otherwise, people are going to pick on you if you use the words incorrectly. They're going to laugh at you. Let's say you want to make an omelet. That probably doesn't seem to have anything to do with what I'm talking about. But let's say you want to make an omelet. What do you need to make omelets? Eggs. Just because you have the eggs doesn't mean you know how to make the omelet. But I tell you what, you can't make it without the eggs. Well, let's say you want to become a writer. You need words. Just because you've got all the words doesn't mean you're automatically a good writer. But you know what? Without those words, you're not going to be able to do it. You need the words to create the thoughts, to create the ideas, to create the book, to create the essay, etc. You get the point. There's another reason. I had to look at the board because I forgot. It may change the way you think. This one may take a minute to develop, but certain ideas come across different ways in languages. For example, in English, if I want to ask you what your job is, I generally am going to say, what do you do for a living? You know what? That sounds like survival. I get up in the morning and I go to work because that's what I have to do to live. And that's fine. That's a good reason, but it's not very exciting. In German, was sind Sie von Beruf kind of means, what is your office? And that kind of feels like you just do what you do because you have to do it. Yeah, it's not very exciting. In Spanish, the phrase is ¿a qué te dedicas? What are you dedicated to? Now that is a different way of asking somebody what they do for a living. In English, survival. In German, it's kind of duty. In Spanish, what are you dedicated to? What are you passionate about? What are you excited about? That may drive you. Do you see how asking the same question in different languages could actually slightly change your thinking? Let me give you another example. The Latin word for stuff is impedimentum or impedimenta. Let's say it. One's plural, one's singular. We'll talk about that later. Ever heard of an impediment? An impediment slows you down. I've got a little girl in my family. I have 4 girls and 1 boy. I've got a little girl in my family, the smallest one. When I say, hey, everybody get in the car, we gotta go somewhere, everybody goes to the car except for the littlest one. She runs back in the house. She grabs a purse and randomly just starts shoving things in it. Sometimes she doesn't even know what she's putting in there. She's just gotta have it full. It slows her down. It slows the whole family down. It's an impediment to all of us. And by the way, if you have any ideas, I'm not sure how to break that habit in her. She has a purse stashed with Impediments, stuff. When I learned that stuff in Latin was impediment, it immediately changed the way I thought about things. And suddenly, at the store, I would look at something and think, do I really need this? Really? Or is this going to slow me down? It changed the way I thought. Guys, 3 reasons to study Latin. And there's more, but these are my 3 favorite. And since I'm the one on the video, I'm giving you my 3 favorite. So there. Number 1, it opens the door to, I think, all languages, but definitely the Romance languages. It opens the door to English. So many of our big words are from the Latin language. And the 3rd one, it can change the way you think. You're gonna love these videos. I'll see you next time.